So, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Empire and Canadian clubs, it's with great pleasure that I introduce today's guest speaker. Dalton McGuinty is Ontario's 24th Premier. And I can share with you something he shared with me just before lunch, and that is he'd like to be Ontario's 25th Premier. Next Wednesday, the people of Ontario will choose their provincial government after a campaign that has been, as they so often are, eventful, thought-provoking, and exciting. Regardless of who wins, many challenges will face Ontario. A dollar at par, an aging population, a need to rapidly become a leader in research and innovation, challenges in education at all levels, challenges in healthcare, and in spite of all these difficulties and challenges, opportunities, the Premier tells me that he still wants to keep his job. Last week, John Tory spoke to some of these challenges and others that he sees as leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. And so today we're fortunate to have Premier McGuinty with us to share his thoughts on these challenges and others that voters have been speaking to him about over the last few weeks as we head into the final days of this election campaign. I'd like to acknowledge the fact that an election campaign full of frantic stops, photo ops, and city hops, the Premier has made time to come and join us for lunch this afternoon. Just a little bit of background on Premier McGuinty. He was elected to the Ontario Legislature in '90, in Ottawa South, re-elected in '95, '99, and 2003. During his time in opposition and as a backbench MP, he served as critic for energy, colleges, universities, Native affairs, and the environment. In 1996, he was elected the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party. In 2003, he led his party to form government, sweeping to power with 72 seats, 47% of the vote. The mantra of Premier McGuinty's Liberal Party in this election is, we've accomplished a lot, but we have a lot left to do. And we look forward to the Premier expanding on these challenges. How can we make this province a better place? If the Liberal Party wins next week's contest, how will they get us there? Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to our podium our very special guest, the Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your very warm and enthusiastic welcome. It is an absolute delight for me to be here today and to be joined by my wife, Terry. I want to thank Alan at the outset for his introduction. Alan has been coming to my events for many, many years now, and remembers when they were substantially smaller. We used to refer to the audience as the head table and that other table. So to see him here in a crowd like this reminds us both of how far we've come. Thank you to the Empire and Canadian clubs for this opportunity. And thanks to all of you for coming out today in such great numbers. Whenever Terry sees this many people in a room where I am the speaker, she likes to encourage me by saying, "Are you sure we're in the right room?" Such is the support I receive on the home front. Terry, you may know, is a school teacher. And one of her favorite books, and one of mine, is a children's book entitled The Little Prince. In essence, it's a book about the clarity with which children see the world and the patience that they need to put up with the rest of us. It was written by a man named Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who knew something about idealism and hope and courage. In fact, he wrote it a year before he died, flying a battle mission over France after volunteering at the age of 42 to help liberate his homeland. And he wrote something I found to be rather remarkable. He said, life has taught us that love does not consist in gazing at each other, but in looking outward together in the same direction. Looking outward together in the same direction. That was his definition of love. If I were to express my greatest hope for this province, which I love deeply, it would be this: that we would look outward together in the same direction. I want Ontarians to look to the world filled with confidence. I want us to embrace the global economy and not shrink from it. I want our collective resolve, I want our shared determination to not merely survive, not merely do all right. I want us to thrive. We've got a lot going for us. We're located in what economic thinkers call one of the leading mega-regions of the world, with access to the massive U.S. market. Ours is an open and diverse economy. From agriculture to resource management, from financial services to the service sector, from high-end autos to high-tech, we excel. We have the kind of infrastructure emerging countries dream of, whether you're talking about bridges or sewers or Medicare, which is a true competitive advantage and the envy of much of the world. You know, one of the greatest privileges that you enjoy when you represent Ontario as the Premier is you have the opportunity to meet with so many other leaders from different parts of the country, different parts of this continent, and indeed leaders from around the world. And it's interesting to hear them talk about Medicare. Sometimes, human nature being what it is, we can take it for granted. But when they talk about it, they don't articulate it as such, but they talk about it with a great deal of envy. And I like to think it's because, you know, we human beings throughout the history of humanity have been known, unfortunately, to be shallow and selfish and short-sighted and mean-spirited. We can be small. But there's something noble in people. I'm not talking about something that's awarded from without, but actually something that comes from within, something noble. You know what Medicare does? It gives expression to this noble human desire to care for people when they're sick. Not because they've got money, not because of any office they might hold, not because of their station in life, not because of who they might be connected to, but just because they're sick. And you should understand that when people around the world look at our system, this means by which we've found a way to give expression to this desire to help one another. It is truly precious and remarkable. But our single greatest asset by far is our people. They speak every language, embrace every culture, have ties to every market in the world, and they possess a work ethic that is second to none. We all know that we face challenges. We are a trading province, and our trade is overwhelmingly with the Americans, and they are experiencing economic challenges. Our manufacturers face outsourcing to China and other countries with low labor costs. And our dollar has risen from 63 cents just 5 years ago to parity today. We have never seen such rapid upward movement, and that too is putting pressure on our exporters. Mais nous pouvons surmonter les défis auxquels nous faisons face aujourd'hui et saisir les occasions qui se présenteront à l'avenir en regardant vers l'extérieur et en investissant dans notre meilleur élément, les citoyens et les citoyennes de l'Ontario. We can overcome today's challenges and seize tomorrow's opportunities if we look outward and strengthen our greatest asset, our people. In today's world, the best jobs and the most investment go to the places with the best educated, most highly skilled people. We are only 13 million people here in Ontario. So if we're going to take on giants like China and India, we need to ensure we are 13 million strong, that every Ontarian is at his or her best. That's why Ontario Liberals have dedicated ourselves to publicly funded education. Our schools are where we equip our children with the education and skills they need to compete. It's why we're placing our dollars and our energy and focus on smaller class sizes and higher student achievement, and it's why in our second term we're going to phase in all-day kindergarten. And with Heather Eastman's help, and inspired by her leadership, in fact, we're going to fill our school libraries with new books. We need more and more and more of our young people to finish high school and go on to university, college, an apprenticeship, or workplace training. And I'm especially proud of a new program we have in place which targets directly what we call first-generation students. It turns out that the single biggest indicator as to whether or not a young person is going to complete high school and go on to college, university, an apprenticeship, or some kind of workplace training is whether your mother or your father ever did that. My family's a good example of that. My dad was the youngest of 6 kids. He was the only one in his family to complete high school. He went on to university, became a university professor. So we grew up in our household with a very heavy expectation that we would focus on our studies, that we would complete high school, that we would go on to college or university. And in fact, all 10 of us went on to university. And apart from the fact that 4 of us became lawyers, we all met with success. But this imperative to be at our best is why we have mobilized a small army of teachers and community workers whose sole focus is to help kids stay in school and help dropouts return to school. It's why we've added 86,000 spaces in our universities and colleges. It's why we've doubled student aid. It's why we've added 6,000 new apprenticeships, with 6,000 more to come over the next 4 years. And it's why we've created 14,000 new graduate school spaces. That's the biggest ramp up in the province's history. And it's why we're investing more than ever before in research and innovation. We want to be the first to come up with new ideas, the first to develop them into new products and services, and the first to sell those breakthroughs, to sell the next BlackBerry and the next best hybrid car to the world. Basically, it seems to me there are 2 ways of approaching today's economy. There is an unimaginative, laissez-faire approach where your exclusive focus is the lowest taxes and the lowest business costs. Everything else then comes secondary to that. This is the approach today's Conservative Party still clings to. My experience as Premier has taught me that this approach is short-sighted and not suited to the realities of competition in the global economy. And it's certainly not in keeping with the aspirations of the people of Ontario. Our approach as Liberals is to run hard and fast in the race to lift up our people. I want to thank my brother for starting that applause. Lifting up your people is right for our society, and it's a smart thing to do for today's economy. And it's exactly what government and business leaders in India and China have told me they're trying to do to catch up to us. In a world where you can borrow capital, copy technology, and buy your natural resources, the only thing that can really set you apart from the competition is the skill and education of your people. So we need to develop talent, and we need to recruit it. Richard Florida, a leading thinker whom we managed to lure from the U.S. just recently to the Rotman School of Management, talks about the importance of building powerful urban centers full of life and energy. These attract what he calls the creative class, workers, artists, and professionals who help fuel the economies of the world's major cities. So when our government contributed to a cultural renaissance here in Toronto, to the ROM, to the Art Gallery of Ontario, to the National Ballet School, and the Four Seasons Opera House, when we dedicated gas tax money to transit here and got to work developing our brownfields in downtown Toronto, we were doing more than advancing the arts or building infrastructure. We were on a recruitment drive. I don't buy the Conservative approach that says government should just cut taxes and get out of the way of business. Yes, we are phasing out the capital tax. And yes, we're working with Catherine and others to help small and medium-sized business by reducing business education taxes. But I just don't believe that the Premier's place is on the sidelines. I believe it's my job to roll up my sleeves and work with business. So we sat down with Ontario's auto sector, with management and labour, and we set up a $500 million auto investment fund. And we leveraged it into a $7 billion new investment and thousands of jobs. We made Ontario, when it comes to auto production, first in North America. And now we're going to leverage our new next generation job fund of over $1 billion to help our companies and workers develop the green technologies the world is clamoring for. And Ontario Liberals understand that we need a strong Toronto to build a strong Ontario. This great city is the heartbeat of our province and the engine of our economy. National governments around the world get this. They know that great cities fuel modern economies. In the U.S. and Britain and the great growing economies of Asia, nations are investing heavily in their cities. At a time of huge surpluses in Ottawa, the Government of Canada should be leading this race. That's why I'm calling on the Harper government to hand over 1 cent of the GST to Toronto and other municipalities to support new growth in the economy. Succeeding today means moving forward together, and that means leaving no one behind. So we're introducing the new Ontario Child Benefit to provide all low-income families with up to $1,100 per child every year to pay for a healthy breakfast, or supplies for school, or warm clothing for a cold winter day. So every child will have the opportunity to succeed, because we need those kids to succeed. We didn't see the Auto Investment Fund as corporate welfare, and we don't see the Ontario Child Benefit as some sort of handout. We see them both as parts of a plan to lift up our economy by building opportunity. Because we know that if we give our people the opportunity to succeed, whether they're kids in school or workers on the line, they can take on the world and win. Our economy is in good shape. It's created 360,000 more jobs than we had just 4 years ago. We've created 3 jobs for every one that we've lost. But that doesn't paper over the fact that we have lost jobs, particularly in manufacturing. So Ontarians have come together through our $500 million advanced manufacturing investment strategy to help our manufacturers invest in innovative technologies and processes so they can compete. Ontarians can take on the world and win if we work and build and dream together. And that starts in our schools. We need our children to look outward together, not gaze at each other across a divide, each in their own schools, according to their own faith. We need to maintain our focus and concentrate our resources on those smaller class sizes, higher test scores, and higher graduation rates. If we spend the next 2 years, my friends, in a quagmire of our own making, debating what constitutes a religion and exactly where the good book must yield to the textbook, we risk standing still while the world passes us by. One of the things that as part of my pitch to the world, when I'm marketing everything that we have here, I tell them that back in Ontario, 27% of the people living there were born outside the country. I tell them we have this capital region, we call it the GTA. I say there are 52% of the people living there. If you can imagine this, 52% of the people living there were born outside the country. So they immediately conjure up pictures they've seen of struggle and strife in the streets of Paris, in London, in Germany, in the Netherlands. So they say to me, well, What are you doing right? How are you making this work with such diversity? I like to think that an important part of the foundation of social cohesion is that we bring our kids together. We want them to come together, learn together, and grow together. In our schools, I want Muslims sitting beside Sikhs, sitting beside Hindus, sitting beside Jews, sitting beside Christians, sitting beside Buddhists. I want us to aspire to doing something that's just more, by the way, than educating our children and developing a strong workforce and developing caring citizens who help us build a strong, caring, and compassionate society. We need to feel a sense of responsibility here. We owe it to the world to demonstrate that we can be a beacon. We can be a shining example. We can actually find strength in diversity. And that's why it's so important that collectively that we continue to support publicly funded education for all our children. You and I have a marvelous foundation on which to build. I know it's human nature for us to focus on work outstanding, things yet to be done. But this is the greatest province and the most blessed country in the world. And we have a strong foundation on which to build. Whether you think of our system of health care, Medicare, whether you think of our publicly funded education, whether you think of our research institutions, public and private, our colleges, our universities, our hospitals, our infrastructure, roads, bridges, all of that, much of the world envies. I'm here today speaking to you about our plan to strengthen our economy, and I hope I've helped you come to understand that the single most important economic strategy that we can deploy in the knowledge-based global economy is to invest in our people, our single greatest asset. But for liberals, the economy has never been the ultimate end. It's been the means to a higher end. A guy by the name of Robert Browning once said, "A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" So at the end of the day, what are you and I really after? What do we really want? I think people deep down want to leave something of lasting value to their kids and their kids' kids. It's more than just a strong economy. Anybody can lust for a strong economy. What I want on behalf of all our children and all our children's children is a strong, caring, compassionate society. That wonderful ideal that reminds us, each and every one of us, that we are in this together. It speaks to something noble inside people, something deep down inside each and every one of us that tells us it is right to care for one another. It is right to look out for one another. It's right to support one another. It seems to me, my friends, that that is something, a strong economy that supports a caring society, that is something worthy of our greatest efforts. That is something worthy of the dreams that maybe we secretly dream for all our children. Thank you very much.
I'd like to call on Catherine Swift, the president of the Empire Club, to offer formal thank you on behalf of both clubs.
I'm not that short.
I am.
Thank you, Alan. Greg Sorbera just told me to rip you apart, just for the record, okay? I just want you to know that. Well, I commend your bravery, Premier McGuinty, to come between such a large crowd and lunch. Always a challenge. And I did have the great good fortune to sit beside Greg Sorbera at lunch today, and which we haven't had yet, which he gave me many confidences that I found very valuable. One of which is that apparently the food fare at cabinet meetings is very different now. Apparently Premier McGuinty is now known as the granola premier, because he has such an interest in health issues that whatever, I guess, unhealthy offerings were there before has now become granola and fruit. I've also heard that, interestingly enough, through all the challenges one faces when one is in politics generally, Dalton McGuinty has never lost his temper. And I think that's a pretty interesting comment to note. Well, this is a very important time for Ontario for a number of reasons. Alan, in his introduction, outlined a number of the things we're facing here in our province, and not uniquely here, but nevertheless. I think we've been blessed in Ontario for many, many years, but we now face a changing landscape in a number of areas that may not be quite as favorable. We've certainly seen international competition intensify, as the Premier noted in his remarks. Many of our historical competitive advantages are not guaranteed in future as they have been in the past. Of course, we have a very high dollar, as we all are well aware, still relatively high taxes. I can't resist mentioning. High prices for a lot of our inputs, notably things like energy and other commodities. And this threatens a lot of our economic cornerstones in Ontario. And certainly the economy is never the be-all and the end-all, but of course a strong economy is what permits us to be a caring and compassionate society. We also do retain many advantages, as the Premier noted. We have a very well-educated population, the benefit of a lot of natural resource wealth, an enviable fiscal situation in many respects. So there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but we certainly can't rest on our laurels. So this is a very important election for Ontario, and we are, I think, somewhat at a crossroads. So thank you very much, Premier McGuinty, for outlining your vision today for our province's future. Thank you.